Welcome everyone and welcome to this new episode of the Google Marketing Platform Academy. Today's subject will be a server-side Google Tag Manager. Today your speakers will be, all French crew, so myself, Romain, as a technical specialist, and our SGTM expert, Solène, that will dive a little bit more in the technical details. So what is the agenda today? It's a bit packed. We want to provide you an overview of SGTM and so that you can get started at the end of this presentation. So we'll go over the value proposition, what are the server managed cookies and how to get started, the privacy feature. And at the end, a Q&A, so don't forget to ask your question. We'll answer at the end of the presentation. So let's get started straight away with the server side. So GTM, Google Tag Manager overview. So as I just mentioned, so we are speaking of Google Tag Manager. So we already have Google Tag Manager on the client side. So that's what we call a TMS, so a tag manager system. And the idea is to reduce the workload of a developer. So you don't necessarily have to modify anything in the code. You can do most of it through a UI in Tag Manager. So that's the main purpose, but it's client side. So everything is still loaded from the client side, and we rely on the library that are loaded. So we control when it's firing, but we don't necessarily control what is exactly sent. We rely on the documentation that is provided to us. So that's the concept of any kind of tag management system. And what we are bringing with server-side tagging is the ability to run another container in the cloud, and then you can basically control what is sent through this server from any source, and to send it to any source as well. So that's a new concept to bring in the end more control of on what is sent through the website. So that's really the idea, to provide more control. And I will show you quickly the high level on how this is working. And so we have a tag manager container that we will call on the client container. That's the base. You need this container. So a tag manager container that we will call the web tag. Then what happens? Typically on a non-server environment, it's just sending the data to the endpoint, either Google Analytics or ads or something similar. What happens here is that we take advantage of first-party cookies, for HTTP cookies, sorry, and we'll get through a little bit in more details what it is about later. And then we have web client that is inside the server tag container. So this web client will take the incoming request, then it can be modified or not, and sent to the final endpoint that is, like I was mentioning, analytics or ads. And in this meantime, we can do anything that we want to this request in the end. So we can add additional information that were gathered from another system, from another server, or we can, remove some information, or we can send this information to multiple endpoints. So not necessarily just, to analytics, or maybe we can send it to multiple endpoints in from just one request. So that's the basic idea. Again, we will show you a little bit in more details how this works a little bit later. But basically, we have a client container. We send the information to the server container, then we modify or not this request, and we send it to the final endpoint. So this is totally transparent for the user. They won't see any difference in in terms of request. It's just we can modify this request until it is sent. So just to compare the server-side tagging and the client-side tagging, what are the benefits? What are the pro and con basically of both system? So in terms of ease of implementation, so yes, client side is always easier because you just have your tagging system and you're good to go. With server side, you need to create this second container to create client in this container, and to create server as well, server tags that are sending the information. So it's a bit more complex, but then it gives more control on what is sent actually. So like everything like that is sent can be modified, can be checked to remove or add additional data. So this is not something that is usually doable from client side. Then in terms of cost, usually client-side tagging doesn't cost much. Like obviously on server-side tagging, there is some cost related because it's running on cloud instances. In terms of site performances, yes, server-side tagging will be above because the idea is that you reduce the number of JavaScript libraries that are loaded from the client side and you use the server side to send it to multiple endpoints. So that's for the pros and cons. I'll move to the value proposition right now. So value proposition. So I think I already highlighted it quite a bit in the previous slide, but I want to emphasize it again. Like we have 4 main points. So to improve the end user experience, obviously like to reduce basically the number of JavaScript libraries that are loaded, so that for the user like it goes faster. Then that to streamline the data flow. So the idea is like to get control over what is sent through the different requests. Better security because since you control this data flow, then you can decide what is sent or what is not sent through this request. And server managed visitor ID that I will go through a little bit later. That is the idea of taking advantage of HTTP cookies instead of relying solely on the client-side cookies, so that are more robust and more durable. So cookies and server managed ID. So what I was just mentioning. So we have kind of two type of cookies, like what we are used to. Look, so third-party cookies that are set on a different domain, first-party cookies that are set on the same domain and that are stored in the browser of the client. And so between client side and we have also HTTP cookies, so first-party HTTP cookies that are set on the advertiser, on the client, domain. So same as third-party cookie, just instead of being set through JavaScript, it's set through the server. So it's a little bit different because JavaScript can't access HTTP cookies. So cookies are just managed through the server side. So how can we enable that? So it's a very simple configuration actually in the different clients that are available in the server side tag manager. So what is the idea? So we use those HTTP cookies, and so the server managed IDs, they are enabled by default for GA Classic, so for Universal Analytics, and for GA4. So I want to explain you a little bit how this works and show you the different options. So what we call server managed IDs, we call it FPID. So FPIDs, it's HTTP cookies. So what happened is actually we decide not to use it. Well, if we decide not to use it, basically nothing changed. The CID stays the same in analytics, and we don't use the FPIDs at all. Now, if the FPIDs and the CIDs are the same, so we will take advantage of the FPID as long as we enable it. And if they are different, so there are two kind of options there. If there was like if you enable in the client side, in the client of the server side tag manager that I will show you just on the next slide, the option to migrate the JavaScript cookie to FPIDs, then if the two are different, we'll take advantage of the FPID. If we don't enable the migration, then we will use the cookie that was set first. So in that case, most likely the client side. So the FPID cookies are really interesting because they are more durable. So like they are HTTPs set through the server. So usually like we see that client JavaScript cookies are deleted and usually HTTP cookies stay a little bit longer on the client side. So we can take advantage of that, and then when a client come back and the CID is not set, but we have a FPIDs, and we can use this FPID to tie this user to his previous client ID. So yeah, if a user already came on the website and the FPID was enabled, and in the meantime they delete their JavaScript cookie, we can take advantage of the FPID cookie. So how to enable this? It's actually so in the option of the GA4 cookie, the GA4 server tags or the universal tag. You have a little option at the end that is, I think, like really important. Unless you start a completely new implementation and that there was no analytics previously on the website, really recommend to check the last box at the bottom to migrate the JavaScript cookie to manage client IDs. So that doesn't mean that it will be completely replaced, but what we are trying to do is that if there's no FPID, but there is a cookie that is already set, we'll use this one for now until it is changed. So first option at the top, use the server manage IDs, and the last option to migrate, really important if there is already a GA4 implementation or a Universal Analytics implementation on the website. So that's it for the overview. Now we will see how to get started, and I will pass the mic to Solène to give you more details.
Thank you, Romain. Thank you for the introduction. Welcome, everyone. I'm happy to have you in the SGTM training. So now we go through how to get started. We will review the basics, the integration also on cloud side, some privacy feature, and how it integrates with some products. We saw some question around consent mode, so we will go through it as well. So how to get started? So first of all, like, is server side right for you? So if you want to improve site performance, as Romain was mentioning, to increase the load, to decrease, to make it your website faster, then it is right for you. So something to remember is that we still need the client-side GA4 tag on site to communicate. So it depends if you want to have the server cookie. So if you want to have the server cookie implemented, so a longer lasting cookie, then it is important to have the G4 tag on site. That is the entry point actually to our server side GTM. So that's, but once you have the G4 tag, then everything communicates. You can trigger quite a lot of events server side afterwards. I will go more into details in the following slide. Of course, control over third-party tags. So we have one slide about privacy feature, and you will see that now we have JavaScript, first-party JavaScript serving, which means that you download the JavaScript from another endpoint like Google Analytics JS. You can define to actually set it within your server and serve those type of scripts within your server with your URL. So I think that's quite a powerful feature that we launched. So of course, you have a greater power into like security and like and privacy, so to avoid data leakage. And for us, it's also like there is a better consistency with our Google tags, and you can better measure with our Google tags, also with a more sustainable in a more sustainable fashion with first-party server cookie. So let's go a bit more into detail. So as I was mentioning, GA4 config tag on client side is something that we advise to still have, but you can also decide not to deploy the GA4 config tag. So you will miss some of the features. So Google Signals will not be in that case available. So that's the downside. So that's something that I will say it's first requirements. Something as well that we opened up in the last months was the multi-cloud support. So I think that's a great that's a great feature that was launched. So multi-cloud support means that you don't need now anymore to be a GCP client to actually use server-side GTM. So you can run. You just need to make sure that you can deploy server-side GTM on a Docker image onto your server. It can be your on-premises or actually using a third-party cloud infrastructure. I will mention a bit more about GCP because that's what we support as Google. So we have a free beta tester program. So we have always a free tier. So if you want, you will see that if you set up your domain, you will have HubSpot domain to start. But then when you have a HubSpot domain, when you try with GCP, you won't be able to set first-party cookie, so first-party server cookie. Don't get me wrong. So when I will say first-party cookie, I will mean server cookie. And then in terms of price, it starts from 120 dollar per month. So how we calculated it is 3 server and that operates on GCP for $40. But I need to say that it depends really highly on your architecture and which type of within GCP, how you actually set your architecture. So you have several possibilities. The most common and the documentation is made with App Engine, but you have also cloud balancing that actually will provide the server automatically, will charge to scale them up. So, and then the cost will depend on actually, how you decide to deploy server-side GTM onto your server. Up. Next, reported tags. So last year when we presented, we were quite far behind. I think we had only Google Analytics and Universe Analytics, Google Analytics 4 and Universe Analytics. Now we actually launch Google Ads, remarketing, Floodlight, conversion linker, and measurement protocol. And we have a lot of new ones coming. I actually advise you if to contact your partner, your Google representative, because your Google representative will be able to share with you the roadmap. So we started with a roadmap as well. So I advise you to contact them. I think it's quite quite exciting what's coming next. And in beta, I put it, sorry, Google Ads remarketing, it's still in beta, and enhanced conversion, it will be set in closed beta. So this, we will also mention it a bit more into details. So it removes PII data from the front end, and the hashing will be done on our side. So also something to look forward into a more safe and secure way to actually share data with different endpoints. So I think that's an easy slide, how to get started. So basically, it's, you open your tag manager account, and then you can set the server container. Quite straightforward. It's a new type of container. And then you have four steps. Something to always keep in mind actually is, okay, here is a basic GCP deployment with a free tier. And here, as you can see, you have the appspot.com, but that won't enable you to set server cookies. So you will need to set your own domain to actually be able to leverage server cookies. Some mistakes that I saw quite frequently when setting up the container is that you are not the GCP, you are not in the right cloud project. And because of that, it caused quite some issues. So you need to make sure that actually when you set up your GCP account for this cloud project, you have in the cloud project GTM dash and then your GTM ID. So that's something to keep in mind. Also here it's not in there, but you can choose the location of your app engine and the location of cloud storage if you want to send data directly to cloud storage. So now servers, like we are going a bit more into actually server-side containers and how it works. Stay with me. It's going to be a bit more technical. So we are actually introducing something new, which is called the clients. So the client is the entry point within server-side GTM. So the clients, it's a new entity type and it claims an HTTP request. So basically it's listen to HTTP request and you like only one client can claim one request. So that's something to always keep in mind. Like several clients could claim the same request, but it's the largest, like the priority client will actually get the request. So something to understand. Then like the client is where you actually set your first party server cookie. So if you want to set JavaScript manage or server manage cookie, it will be done within the client. So always something to remember. And it will send a response back to the origin. So like often the origin will be the browser, for example, but could be any other like endpoint that you use for data enrichment, for example. So something to keep in mind. Then afterwards, how it works is that the client, like I will take the visualization because I think it's quite easy. When you send data via measurement protocol, you have the collect, you have Google Analytics, like question mark collect, and then the information from the it afterwards. And what it does, it's basically it sends this raw HTTP request and creates an event data object, and then I I didn't went to the poll, but uh, we can go afterwards. So I'm quite looking forward to see the answer of what you are excited about. Also afterwards is the poll. So for the privacy feature, what to keep in mind. So I'm not like I will come afterwards into the right answer. I finish this one, but yeah, sorry, like a bit of disconnect on that one. So what it does is, so the client is basically taking the full like request, as you can see in the measurement protocol, and create an event data object that will afterwards where you can create variable from. So something to keep in mind is what we see also as a mistake is that people recreate exactly the same variable as they have um, on their on their client side. No need. So variables are already passed in the event data object. So the information are already present. So no need to recreate exactly the same setting as what you had on client side. So I think that's quite interesting to note. And yeah, like once the client actually claim a request, it creates a virtual container, and then it checks all the tags and triggers and see like which tag and triggers can benefit from it, like can use this particular, like which fits the particular client's request. So that's how it works. And then tags. So like you can send from the client several events, so several event data object, and then it can be sent to several tags, and you can like either from the clients from the same events and several tags, or from several events send several tags. So like there are several possibility actually. Next, privacy first feature. So now we are actually arriving into the poll. So the yeah, 80% of the persons in in our GMP spotlight were right. So it's all of the above. So quite happy to walk you through all the new privacy feature. I think it's a great step forward and for Europe, and like privacy is really important, and I think it's a great step in that direction. So IP anonymization, so this is automatically done in the server container being passed to Google collection. So that's so there is nothing to do on your side, so that's automatically done. Yeah, great step. So like even before like it sends the data to any to GA endpoints, it's already anonymized. So everything happened within the container. IP reduction. I will have a slide afterwards, so I will show you how easy it is. You can either like you have a Boolean possibility, true or false, or you can get a bit more into details with variables to actually do the IP reduction. Then app engine location. So that's also like it's not in terms of processing of GA, but the app engine location, cloud storage location can be chosen now to like it was already be chosen, but it can be done. So if you don't want your data to leave Europe, then everything can be done in Europe within GCP. Then first-party JavaScript serving. So I will also have a few slides. So now it's possible from GTM.js and GTM. And so you don't need to load some bemol. I think there was a bug actually, but enhance e-commerce JavaScript, Google Analytics JavaScript, so third-party domains do not load like the data anymore. You can actually, my example domain could load all the analytics JavaScript. So that's quite a big step forward again. And product support, I will go through consent mode and enhance conversion. Again, it's in closed beta, but I will introduce you on how we went further into privacy on those points. So for IP reduction, so it's as mentioned, so redact visitor IP address is here. You can either choose a Boolean false or true, or like afterwards you have like a possibility to choose a variable as well, depending on how much from the IP you would like it to be redacted. Then loading script from server container. So I will have one slide for gtm.js and gtag.js. So of course it prevents PII data leakage and reduce dependency on third-party domains. So yeah, but first you need to create a web container client in your server container. So that's quite important. So here you see, yeah. And I don't think there is in the I didn't put, so normally you can specify yeah, sorry, it's no, it wasn't in the screenshot, sorry. But there is a possibility within the interface in the client to actually define the custom URL. It's I think it can be a constant and a variable set as variable. And here, what does it actually change is we are all used to deploy on our website the Google Tag Manager, so it's not no more www.googletagmanager, so it will be www.mydomain.com, which is way more, so which increase privacy and like data leakage as well as attacks. So. And then loading from GTag.js. So if you don't have gtm.js, it also works with GTag.js. So that's great. And here you can here you can either choose the default path or choose to put your custom custom domain. So here, instead of a Google Tag Manager, define like, again, as I was mentioning, your domain URL. Consent mode integration, I think it was asked also as question. So when consent mode is implemented client-side, all parameters are automatically forwarded to the server container. So it works, it also works with FPID. So when you have the GA4 client side tag, then it actually passes the information to like our server-side container for the FPID. And on top of it, we have like the conversion linker as well on the server-side tag responsible for cookies. And then like if you send like analytic storage denies an FPID, it is not set or read. And when add storage is denied, so like, because of course it uses like the GA4 client-side tag, so it's not shared with ad product. So like when we resolve it in the server container, this is not passed. And enhanced conversion integration in SGTM. So I added a star because, of course, like as mentioned, it's in closed beta. So we have like automated authentication handling. So before, like you add a token that needs to be refreshed, of course, for privacy reasons, and that was required to be done manually or automatically by advertiser, and that's something that will be handled directly within server-side GTM. We will also now have batch support within server-side GTM, so you can batch the event together and send the information to like, so the tag will do it by itself, but that's a quite cool feature. And then easier audit and debugging for the validation of your enhanced conversion implementation. So because of the server container and the troubleshooting from the server container, from the debugger from server-side GTM, of course. And then we will take care also of auto hashing. So we will you don't need to do anything with hashing, and we will take care of it and resolve it so it avoids mistakes and implementation issues. I think I'm arriving to an end with my section. So now we will start the Q&A with Romain. And I think we already added like one question to see if everyone was following. Do we still need a client-side tag when using server-side GTM? So yes, so you need like at least what we advise is GA4 config tag for it to work perfectly with our Google Ads tag.
Yes. Okay, let's see the live questions. Okay, so I think there was one that was answered, like how does consent mode work in server side tagging? Yeah, I think like mainly the idea is that like cookies that are not set will be subject to the same rules than with consent mode, like in a standard client environment. So if everything is denied, no FPID will be set as well.
I can take one from can SGTM be used as an endpoint for Firebase SDK? Right now we don't have integration, so I was checking that for some clients. So we don't have integration with Firebase SDK yet. It was planned. It was said to be on the roadmap, but nothing sure. Like, but there is always measurement protocol, but yeah, it's not yet fully integrated with Firebase SDK, sadly.
Yes, so consent mode, yeah, Yeah, we had another question that we can just give you a high-level answer about like the cost of a GTM server side. I mean, it depends a lot in the end of how many requests are sent. If you use Google Cloud Platform or if you use another cloud platform, so it's very hard to give an actual estimate, because it depends completely on how much data are sent. So if like if few data are sent, it will cost nothing, and then if a lot of data are sent, it will cost a bit more. But it's for the moment it's hard to give an exact numbers.
And I think something to add is that there is like a cloud pricing tool that can help you to estimate. So it has a lot of particularities. So depending on latencies that you can have for like how long you want as a time out for your event. So if you will be waiting quite a long time for an event to be processed, then of course it increases how many. So if you use cloud balancing, so how many requests do you expect to have at the same time, depending how many instances you want to be provisioned as minimum. So there are quite a lot of things coming into question. So that's why we can't say like it's like this. Um, and also depending on your architecture, cloud architecture afterwards. Um, oh,
Yeah, do you want to take the next one about?
so I'm not sure. So I'm questioning which where we why do we use GA4 tag to activate GTM server side? You didn't go through it, right?
No.
So it's still because we are relying like the GA4 tag will set the transport URL and the transport like it's in the case you want to leverage first party server cookies. So if you want to leverage server side cookie, then the GA4 tag is necessary because that's what will be setting the transport URL, which is like basically your custom domain. So it will, if you have myexample.com and you go onto your website and you set the transport URL with GA4 tags, and all the collect requests will be sent to myexample.com, like question mark, and then all your its information. So that's why it's like we say like I think it's a big use to have a first party server cookie. So yeah, that's why we mentioned that it's necessary. But if you don't want, you can actually send data within server side, do some processing. But yeah, it actually depends of what is your end goal.
Thank you, Soren. So I think like the next two questions, we can probably combine them into one. So that was like as someone who is more into dashboard building or data consumption, how best to get into implementation, which courses, language or type of job should be invested. And that kind goes with like how to migrate client-side container to server-side container and how straightforward it is. So that's the thing. Like as we mentioned, you still need to have client tags that will send like the first information, and then the server-side GTM will ingest that, and you can modify the request or not. So if it's just a matter of migrating, not doing any customization or something like that, it just free tags like Solen just show in the presentation. So in terms of just a pure migration where we do no customization, it's really super straightforward because there is no additional kind of tags needed. It's not like you retag completely in server side. It's like you take what you have already on the client side, and then we just modify the request. So there is no like in terms of adding triggers or anything like that. So that's for the, let's say, super simple migration. Now, like, what if we want to go a little bit further So that's more related usually to data manipulation and server request manipulation. So it's a bit more complex, but usually, like you use your dev team that you use for client tagging should be able to 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 go over that. So it's so to sum up, like the pure migration is kind of easy. It's just setting up free tags. Then if you want to go further, it requires customization, and then it's you need to go a bit more in details and to have a bit more experience in terms of coding.
So quite a lot. So I can go fast for this custom JavaScript variable. The issue is that currently the variable are set synchronously and actually when the container resolved, and because of that it's not yet available, but it's like the good like if we have like I'm not I'm being careful about which information I'm spilling, but it's down the road really soon. So if we don't have our code freeze before, then it's this year or next year, early next year. So like it's coming. It's something coming. What kind of metrics would you suggest monitoring? So it depends again, like if you, what kind of metrics would you suggest monitoring when comparing server-side tracking to client-side? So um, like it depends. Like I'm reviewing few implementation, of course, side loading. So depending on how you organize your tags, if you remove client-side tags, so all your Google Ads tag and Floodlights tag, and you just rely on the config tag from GFR, then side load is for sure something to look at. Returning visitors, it actually also depend. Like I don't know if you went a bit more into troubleshooting why like returning visitors is there is no increase in returning visitor. Is it maybe because your funnel is actually quite a short funnel and you don't have returning visitor? It depends also on the type of retail. If not, I will really consider to check if you have within the client tag, make sure that you have a matching from CID to JavaScript and JavaScript manage ID to server manage ID, because that will also explain why the transition has not been done. Other metric will be like I would expect the returning visitor actually to increase. So I would say maybe there is like it could come also from consent. So that's something you really need to analyze how you work with consent and how the cookie are set with consent. So it's not like one stop. Of course, like we are working with less data, and that's the future. We will have more modeling. So you need to understand how basically consent works with your implementation. Not an easy one and not a straightforward. I would say like to analyze, it might be checking, doing checks with the FPID, I will say.
Thank you, Sen. Yeah, I can take the next one from Kim. Like, yeah, so the question is like, are we still relying on client side, and that the client side can be the bottleneck? And so yes, that's true. Like so, and like we mentioned, like the best practice is to rely on the client side. But now that doesn't mean that you can't send server to server hits. Like if you want to do it, you can do it. But the thing is that like we need still information from the user themselves, you know, like which channels they are coming from, and that's information that are much easier to gather on the client side than on the server side. So that's why we still rely and that we will rely on the client information, and the server side is just to make sure that everything that we want to send is sent. And there was a question that goes a little bit with that about which data are sent to analytics, for example. How can we change it? So there are a few, like in the server tags themselves, there are a few possibilities already to remove or add some variables. Now, if you want to go really deeper and modify completely the request, and that's true for any request that is sent and that you claim through server side, then you would need to create custom server tags in the server containers to modify and take advantage of what you want to see. So, but we provide some built-in tags and clients in the server side, but then that's kind of the start point and where you can do basic manipulations. And if you want to go in more details, then it's needed to rely on your own custom server or client tags in the SGTM.
Okay, you mentioned that it's possible to change the data which sent to analytics, for example, but it's not clear how and where you can change it. So you can change it within the client. There are quite a lot of possibilities to change within the client with variables. Like I would, it's not so. It requires some, like I think like the more advanced implementation will require actually to, for now, like until we don't have async variables, will require to make some outside calls within the clients, resolve everything within the clients, and then sending back to the tags. You can try to resolve to the tags statically. Okay, my French is taking over. But yeah, like it's mainly for now, like we have a bit of limitation in terms of how far we can go, I think, or I feel. But so I will say, if you really want to do a lot of changes within your, like, how, like, the data that you want, that you are sending to your server endpoints, and enrich it with other endpoints, and everything needs to be done on the client, and maybe do like some yeah, API call, and which will send a call back. So it's not amazing, but that's we are still a bit investigating. For us also, it's quite a new product, so yeah, a lot more to come, I think.
Yeah, I think we are a bit over time, so let's take maybe two more questions and or maybe three. Let's see. So what is the main difference between the beta version, like into this version Go, and now, like, let's say, like, beta version, usually it's just that like we want to be sure that we have identified all possible bugs and that it's stable. So that's the main difference. Like, when we basically that it's released out of beta, is that we identify all the major bugs, we tweeted them, and the product is stable. Like, I don't know, like, the answer. I don't think we can at the moment for the next question. Like, if we can send multiple location for the containers.
So I don't know if there is so much network latency. Like that's a good one. I will say. I actually I had some implementation with CDN, and I would need to check a bit more into details actually. But the like the balancing and sorry, like yeah, like yeah, to be honest on that one, is it possible to set multiple location for the containers for everyone to know? I would like to check more into details. I need to say something that I can answer quite fast, and I'd let you speak, Romain. Is will we be able to see and modify built-in templates? So that's something I requested. I talked with some clients that were requesting it as well. So the person who raised the question, please like raise it as well to your sales representative, so we can echo and have more like company plus one, like what we are saying as technical team, because I think it's really important to have transparency as well in terms of the client and tag that we are putting within server side.
Yes. And probably I think like you can still ask questions. So I thought we were on time, but we have still a bit of time actually. But so there will be a second sessions to go deeper and go in best practices. We would love to. No, I can't. We can't give you an ETA. To be completely fair, probably not for until the end of the year. Maybe beginning of next year once more users are using SGTM basically. But it's great to see all the enthusiasm around SGTM. That's cool to see like a lot of people wants to customize actually what requests are sent. And we're also excited to see what kind of custom templates are built and so on by the community. So maybe 10 more seconds for a last question if you want to type it really fast. Okay. So we can wrap up. Thank you everyone for attending, and thank you for all the questions. That's great to see all the enthusiasm. Thank you, Solène, and don't forget about the feedback survey at the end.
Thank you, Romain, and yeah, please give us some feedback. We want to improve the format and share with you the best content possible.